This video is about Qor's ground, watercolor ground, and the difference between the cold press ground and just the plain watercolor ground. There's quite a bit of difference, and boy, I like both of them. So it all started out with this painting, which I thought was just fine. I thought it was ready to go, done. And then I noticed that the bottom of the mullen in the back just had these little wimpy entry into some rock wall that had no depth either. So I realized I needed to do something to fix this. And how am I going to do that over really dark watercolor? So it occurred to me after a couple of days of agonizing over this that if I put some bigger leaves, because there's always leaves down on the ground in here, it would settle the plant into the rocks. So what to use? Because I've got to cover up all this super dark and provide a ground for me to paint the leaves on it. So I have a couple of options, and one of them is this watercolor ground by Qor. That's what's on here now, and it's going to require another coat, it looks like. There's another one too that is, it says cold press ground. This one is very interesting because it has shiny little bits of I don't know what it is. It's like mica or something. And possibly I can show that to you here on these little rocks, these ones right back here. You might be able to see some of the shiny stuff on there, and it shows through on the after you put watercolor on. So next step is to do another layer of this. I could use gesso also, which was very successful for me in a different painting. Then these rocks over here, so boring, they look very flat and so forth. What's so cool about that is I can take some of this watercolor ground that is the cold press and watch what happens. I'm using a charcoal white pencil to help me decide the shape of these rocks, so that I don't have to do too much thinking when I have the painter. They're called brushes when I have the brush in my hand. So I want to bring these rocks forward and pull that one back. Maybe create another rock in here. Okay. So I'm not going to put it on the back there, let that fade away. There we go. All right. So now I know where I'm going. So I'm going to use watercolor ground, but for the rocks, I'm going to use this cold press because this is the one that has that weird shiny stuff in it. Also, it has a very strange look about it. Just put a little bit of water in there, and I'm using a filbert brush so that I can paint on this from the side of the brush. And I'm just simply going to lighten up the front of some of these rocks, and by using this filbert, it makes a very rough top to it. Now this will be a little off-white because it will fade somewhat, but this is so cool. And then I can go back in and put a little bit of color on here on these rocks and just pull these forward. Once that dries, you'll see just a little bit of that shiny mica type of stuff. I have no idea what that is, but it's cool. And then I'll just stop this for now. I've got to think about the shape. It's starting to look like popcorn. Then the other thing I wanted to show you is this part here. This, I love this. This is the regular ground all over this. I was wondering how I was going to make the sand. And it's just regular ground with watercolor put across the top and little splotches of water. And just look at it over here. Is that so cool? So even though they say watercolor ground brings it back to the paper, the look of the paper, it really doesn't. But there are some other things you can use it for, which I just love. When you first paint on these substrates, it doesn't look like it's going to be at all compatible to the rest of the painting. I mean, to be honest, I don't exactly understand or know how to tell you how freaky it is, but it totally is. But if you just let it dry, it turns out like that one, which is just fine. And if it does not work, then I'll just put some of that substrate on some of these leaves up here, and then that increases the compatibility of the two. So we'll see. I've got to let that doesn't look to me like that's going to work right now. So I've got to wait and let it dry and see then what I think. See, it just doesn't look right. But that I know enough now, I've done it enough that I know that even if it doesn't look right now, it's probably going to be just fine. So weird. This is weird stuff. And probably, you know, a straight watercolorist would be aghast at all this stuff. But for me, it works because I love watercolor. But I do make mistakes and I have to figure out how to make it work. And finally, when this stuff dries on the rocks, you can glaze over it with a variety of colors. And just, let's see, that's burnt sienna, and I think I'll just put a little bit of Payne's gray in here. Maybe, how about just a purple of some kind? Yeah, just give it a little bit of extra color, and you're done. So I hope that this sort of product review will help you with your own paintings. I'm sure using a lot of it for this solo watercolor exhibition at the Washington Pavilion coming up in November. So it'll run from November 5th through April 8th. And there are about 36 wildflowers and weeds and all kinds of fun things in South Dakota.